Outside the Box Reviews, it's Figure Wars. And today we're looking at, on the left, the NECA Player Select Assassin's Creed Altair figure. And on the right, the McFarlane Assassin's Creed Wave 3 Altair. Well, they included his last name, but I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce that. Sorry. And the gauntlet has officially been thrown down. Kicking off the third wave of McFarlane's Assassin's Creed figures, they are going and doing a figure that NECA has already hit. So now we can get a direct one-to-one comparison between the way it was done and the way it's being done. And between this and my next video, we'll get a pretty clear look at the whole setup, because here we have NECA's first foray into the Assassin's Creed line, an older figure lacking some of the more modern touches that NECA ended up bringing eventually. But the next review, we're going to be looking at Revelations Ezio, and that was one of NECA's best figures in the Player Select line that I ever saw, at least. And McFarlane definitely has its work cut out for it there. But let's jump right in and take a look and see how these figures stack up. And both figures share a lot of similar accessories. Here on the left, we have the throwing dagger for NECA's version. It's obviously plastic, but it looks like a straight piece of metal. It's got a little hook here at the bottom and some ornate detailing down here where you'd actually grab it. The McFarlane one really is a smaller version of the same thing. It flares out a little more here at the edge, but all those same kind of little detail pieces and some fuzz are located right down here at the bottom of it. So really, for being a smaller scale piece, they still put in a lot of sculpted detail. Color-wise, they both kind of did the same thing. They're both a silver. NECA's is a little lighter of a silver than the McFarlane, more gray and iron looking. And they definitely have some paint shading on it to make it look old and tarnished and weathered, but very similar little blades here. NECA stores all four of them in little pouches on the front of the figure, and they slide in very easily. They stop when they hit that little hook, and they stick out the bottom of the holster. McFarlane also has four of the blades. You can see them all here. Same idea, it will slide into the holster. Now this is a much tighter fit, and I actually ended up having one of the holsters rip, putting one of the blades in. The blades come separate, so you do have to install them yourself when you first get the figure going, and this blade would not go in. I eventually applied a little extra force, and it ripped out the top of the pouch. Next up, we're going to be taking a look at these swords. NECA's sword has some great detail on it. The little edge of the hilt here looks like an eagle's head. You see some painting and sculpting going on there. The brown leather of the grip, kind of wings coming off here at the top of the hilt, and then a nice blade, similar color to what we saw with the throwing daggers. But McFarlane hits very much the same thing. The back end of this is less eagle looking, just more of a little curve going on. We still do have the same strap detail here on the handle, same kind of wings coming off the side, and a nice blade to it as well. It's smaller, so I would expect less detail, but it definitely captures the look of the sword. NECA has a sheath here on the side of the figure. You just slide it right in, and we get the same thing with McFarlane. Just a simple little sheath, move it past all of his other gear, and it sits right down in there. But NECA has one accessory that McFarlane doesn't. It has the short sword, which has some pretty good detail on it as well. A nice ornate hilt, then a nice silver short blade on there. And then this slides right into this back sheath for easy and convenient storage. McFarlane has a little pouch here on the back, but it's definitely not the sheath for that sword. That sword being one of my favorite weapons in the game, I would have liked to see it represented, even if it was just stuck forever in the pouch and not a removable piece. For the sculpt of this figure, one of the sore spots with NECA has always been the face. The face is just kind of something they made up, I think. The original Assassin's Creed game, they basically just made Altair look like Desmond. And I'm not sure if it's supposed to be that Altair actually looked like Desmond, or I guess vice versa, or if it was just Desmond was taking over the role of Altair, and that was kind of the visual effect to show that happening. But this face looks nothing like Desmond. It's a decent artist's rendition, I guess you could say. I think the hood is done pretty well. It doesn't look exactly game accurate, but I like what it does for the articulation. This hood just kind of comes up around the head. It does have the little pointed eagle's peak here at the front, but then it kind of tucks in under this collar. It would naturally just kind of slope down the sides as an actual hood. The hood and the shoulder piece are both a softer rubber material, so it helps with articulation. Here on the shoulder, we have some extra shoulder armor and the strap coming down here. The strap's always bugged me because it's kind of sculpted on a different plane than the continuation over the shoulder. So there's definitely kind of a disconnect here at this point. It's got kind of a tabard going on, so it's like a sleeveless kind of shirt going down. That becomes the individual little dress skirt part here at the bottom. This is sleeves with all the wrinkles sculpted sculpted in. There's one bracer, just like a leather bracer with some nice straps going on. And the other one featuring the hidden blade. There's a little peg down here or a knob that you can move and make the blade slide out, and then you can retract it on its own. Pretty simple mechanism. Mine is slightly warped, kind of coming off the gauntlet, but I think it's alright. On the other side of that gauntlet, there's some nice sculpting, kind of an armor going down his forearm. He's got his gloved hand right here with some kind of rivets over the knuckles, and of course missing that finger, the ring finger, where the blade should theoretically shoot out to be more stealthy. And then here we have my jacked up right hand. This figure originally came with two right hands, a relaxed hand and a gripping hand for the weapons. I bought this figure used. I only got the relaxed hand, and I tried to make some modifications to kind of mold it into a gripping hand. Didn't really work, and now it just kind of looks ugly. So kind of bad on my part, but this is an ungloved hand. What is still left of the original sculpt that I haven't destroyed is pretty nice looking. He's got his big belt around here, of course, with all the pouches I already talked about. Kind of a red sash underneath with a little tie hanging down the front of it. But once again, there's a disconnect between the two pieces. They don't really flow together. And then we have the sheath and everything involved with that. Some nice detailing down the sheath. Some pouches on his back. Some little canisters, maybe like gas bombs or something. The skirt itself is not slit up the sides or anything. It comes up to about his knee where it actually splits here. And then it's split all the way up the front and all the way up the back. Underneath, we have his pants with a lot of wrinkles in there. Got his boots and some nice detail coming down to the feet as well. But also on this one boot, we have some extra throwing knives that are not removable. And we also have those back here on his shoulder. So this Altair kind of represents the ultimate version of Altair. The Altair towards the end of the game where he had all of his equipment back, because in the beginning of the game, you are stripped of all that equipment. Then we look at McFarlane's version and we can see there's no knives up here on the shoulder, no blades on his foot, and maybe that even explains why we just have a little pouch back here and not the short sword. It's possible. McFarlane's face went full Desmond, I think. This really looks like Desmond, but I think they did a really good job on making it look like him. It even has a little scar here on his mouth, which is some great detail. The hood, of course, has the little eagle peak on it, but this is actually more of a hood like it would appear in the game, so it actually kind of comes down to the shoulders. I think it still looks a little bulbous and a little awkward, but it's pretty well done. There's some great wrinkles in here too, and some stitch lines going up the back. Go around to the chest, he has the same little strap across his chest. This is a rubberized piece, so it is movable. If you pull this shoulder piece down, the hood itself feels like it could be removable, just like what I did with Adewale, but it feels like it's actually attached a little better here in the back than the Adewale's was on the two pegs on the side. So I don't want to risk ruining the figure by pulling this completely off. But there are some little ornate ornamental details, just like NECA had on this little kind of clasp piece here. He also has the ornate belts, all the same kind of detailing, the same little sash underneath that hangs down the front, but this sash is not a separate piece. It's all molded into this single front end of the figure. This is all one solid block of rubber, so none of this is individually movable, except for the scabbard, which will move a bit. Once again, some good detailing on it, just like NECA had. Coming down the arms, he has the one gauntlet, which is a little bit shorter than NECA's is. And then the ungloved hand, this is just a gripping hand, so you can use it for all of his weapons. On the other side, we get the same kind of armor on the back of his gauntlet. Here we actually have two different mechanisms to make the hidden blade. We have the extended version, which is not actually sharp at the end. It's flattened out. I don't remember if that's game accurate or not. But then you can actually unpeg this, and then pegged in the closed version, where it's all retracted back in there. And it's very clean, very effective, though I don't like having to switch them out. I'd rather have a moving mechanism, but on a figure this small, maybe it just wasn't doable. The hand, same kind of details. It's missing the one finger too. Has all the rivets on the back, just like NECA's had. A little less detail in the glove itself, but still decent. Across the back, we have the same kind of idea, some pouches. Only one canister where NECA had two, but not a big deal. This is, once again, all just one solid piece. And you could barely see under the skirt to see where his pants are. And then his boots. And once again, very similar detail to what NECA has, so that's definitely impressive. For paint, NECA has a very kind of dark tan skin tone for Altair here, and the one thing that was very controversial to figure is they painted in a lot of kind of facial hair on there. In the game, at best, it's kind of a 5 o'clock shadow, but this is a little heavy-handed. There is some good detail on his face with his eyes and his eyebrows, though. The majority of his costume is this white with some kind of gray shading going on. Areas around the neck here are a little darker, a little more gray than they are white. Get some accents in the stitch lines in his head and darker color as well. His sleeves are a dark gray with some even darker gray mixed in to kind of give some low lights. Gauntlets are nicely done. Some nice variety of browns in here with the silver buckles. Same thing going on with the other side. A nice silver for the hidden blade. A very dark gray for the armor up here. Brown for the glove. Some good shading across the belt. Even the tassel hanging down has some nice shading. But this underneath red area here, which I assume is supposed to go with this tassel, actually doesn't match. It's a very bright red here with some very obvious darkness going on in the paint, and then much more subtle and realistic looking on the little hanging down part. More kind of shaded, just the white area going down. Gray pants without a whole lot of paint detail on them. With some very nicely done brown boots, and some silver detailing on the buckles on the side as well. Coming around the back, we have all the details back here. The gray pouches with some black shading on them, some little silver rivets on them as well, and overall a pretty nicely detailed out figure. A lot of great color variation on him. McFarlane, we get a lot of the same. The robes have a very similar color pattern, being kind of darker off-white with some black shading going on, but it's not as heavy of a black shading. The belt, at least on here, looks continuous. It looks like it all belongs to the same color plastic and has consistent shading throughout. The brown part of the belt, however, I feel could use a little extra shading in there. It's a little flat looking. The sleeves also are not as dark a gray as NECA went. I actually like NECA's dark gray. These being so light, it looks like it kind of just blends in with the rest of his clothing. And there's actually a disconnect between this upper part of the sleeve and the lower part, almost looking like it's two completely different pieces of clothing. Some good brown transitions in here on the wrist gauntlet, just like NECA did. Silver buckles down the side. Nice skin tone going on. On the gloved hand, I do have a little paint splotch, some flesh tone going down the side of his glove. The hidden blade on McFarlane's is a much more tarnished looking silver or steel color, which I do like a bit more. And a similar steel color going for the armor on the back of the gauntlet. Shading gets very heavy in the lower section of his tabard, which is kind of interesting. It's very light through this upper section. Maybe it's almost like he's kicking up dust and getting dirty on that part. Scabbard, some nice silver detailing as well as some black. For the pouches and back, McFarlane caught all the detail NECA did, and they even added a gold little buckle here to this one pouch, which is very nice attention to detail. McFarlane did their pants in a much darker color. They're more brown, and there's some good paint shading to make them look like leather pants. But that same color continues onto the boots, so there is really no definition really besides a sculpt of where one ends and the other begins. But still some great detail and more little buckles detailed on here. I've said it before, but I think articulation is very important with these Assassin's Creed figures. NECA's version has a ball joint at the base of the neck, and because of the way this hood is sculpted, he gets a really good range of motion. He can look up a decent amount, he can look down pretty far, and then side to side is really good, and you get some nice tilting as well. And wherever you want the character's eye line to be, it's very easy to get him looking. He's got pin socket shoulders, so he can go out pretty far, as well as go forward and back. They are slightly hindered by these shoulder pieces, but they are rubberized, so they'll mostly get out of the way. This is an older NECA figure, so I do worry about how secure the shoulder is going to be in the long run of messing with it. You can swivel at the elbow, as well as bend. He bends about 45 degrees. He has a ball joint at both wrists. He has a ball joint at the mid-torso, so he can lean forward and back, a little side to side, as well as rotate. This front of this belt is rubberized, so it gets mostly out of his way when you turn him. Altair's leg just has a simple hinge joint up in here, so to move forward and back, you actually have to have the leg sitting at its normal position, and then you can move forward and back on that hinge. And then to get to move out to the side, you actually have to rotate the whole leg sideways, and then move on that same hinge in a different direction. A pretty awkward leg joint. You can also bend at the knee about 45 degrees as well as swivel. Then he has a hinge at the foot as well as the ability to rotate. McFarlane gives us a ball jointed head, so you can move it up and down a little bit, side to side, but you're hindered by having the hood the way it is. The hood's static, so you just kind of have to get your thumb in there and move it around. Also causes some issues because you want to have him looking off to the side at somebody, and he's mostly just looking at his own hood. We do have the ratchet joint, pin and socket joints at his shoulders, so they'll go in and out really well, forward and back. Once again, slightly hindered by his shoulder pieces, just like NECA, but also once again rubberized to get out of your way. He has a ratchet joint about 45 degrees at the elbow, as well as swivel. The cool McFarlane wrist joints here, where you can swivel at the wrist as well as hinge in and out at that ratchet joint, and then swivel the hand and hinge at a different direction with the ratchet joint, which I love. Very similar to Hot Toys. He just has a cut joint at the waist. You feel like there's a little flex up and down, but I can actually see the joint separating back here, and it's just kind of a plug. He has ball joints at the hips, and because this skirt on him is pretty restrictive, you don't get a whole lot of forward and back movement. You do get a little better side to side. He has a ratchet joint at the knee, and he can bend a full 90 degrees as well as swivel. And then he has a very nice ball joint at the foot with a pretty good range of motion. So overall, I think these two figures are pretty on par with one another, and I'm pretty surprised at that. Now, this is, of course, on NECA's part, a very early entry. This is kind of back from when NECA was just starting to up their articulation and make better articulated figures. As I already said, when we go and look at what's next with the Revelations Ezio, it's gonna be a different story. And I have to admit, I probably should have said this up front, but somebody told me the first time I reviewed this Altair that mine was a bootleg and not correct, and I have no way to prove or disprove that, but I am operating under the assumption that it is a real figure until somebody can show me definitive proof that it's not. But I recommended the NECA Altair the first time I reviewed him, and I still think he's a solid figure, so I don't see any reason why I shouldn't give McFarlane a recommend too. Now, having these guys side by side here, zoom out a little bit, the one thing I didn't address directly in this video, which is kind of the elephant in the room, is how much smaller McFarlane's figure is. He's definitely a couple inches shorter than NECA's, and I much prefer the NECA 7-inch scale to these about 5-inch scale McFarlane figures. But overall though, they have very, very similar flaws, and the things I don't like on the McFarlane figure, I can't say NECA did any better when they did theirs. So, am I super pleased about that? No. But this is at least a good place to start with McFarlane going back and doing the older characters. And since NECA isn't making Assassin's Creed anymore and I have to put all my hopes on McFarlane, I do hope we see some more classic versions. I actually really hope we see an older version of Altair from Revelations. I hope we get a couple more versions of Ezio, and maybe some of those assassins from the comics too. So both figures get a recommend, but let me know in the comments below. How do you feel? Do you like one more than the other? Also, make sure you check me out on Instagram, username Outside the Box Reviews, and follow me on Facebook, link below. And until next time, it's been our Outside the Box Reviews. Stay tuned for more to come.